story begins in a magical world called Arpedia. However, it's not technically a real place, because you can only get there when you're online. You see, Arpedia Online is regarded as the greatest fantasy game among modern virtual reality games. It uses a game-specific capsule to deliver to the five senses in such a way that it can't even be distinguished from reality. Basically, the user is placed in this futuristic capsule, and then their consciousness is transported to the fantasy world, thanks to the patented scanning technology that it uses to create an avatar identical to the user. This amazing game is also paired with the latest AI technology, which allows the NPCs and monsters to act like they have actual sentience. It also offers a well-paced and fun experience without the need to wail, adding to the reasons why it's regarded as the greatest Korean game of all time. The game has become so popular that people have started paying close attention to the actions of the game's top players. But even among the best, there's always one person who stands out. The most notable of them is none other than the rank 50 warrior, Bartz. So why do people pay so much attention to him, even when he's not the highest ranked player in the game? Well, it's because Bartz is quite different from the rest. In Arpedia Online, teaming up and forming parties is considered necessary for survival, but Bartz remains the only hardcore solo player who managed to take on the Rage Dragon alone. As you'd expect, rumors started making the rounds about Bartz's identity in the real world, but they're all just speculative. Some say that he's someone with a close relationship to the developer of the game, while others think that he's a rich boy who whaled an incredible fortune into the game. But truth be told, our boy isn't any of those at all. Instead, in the real world, Bartz is just an unemployed man named Kang Yuhan. And he mostly stays in his room thinking about what the people in the game say about him. He doesn't know why they're all getting excited just because he defeated a Rage Dragon. To him, Rage Dragons aren't that big of a deal, and he even went to visit his grandma after the feat, leaving the rest of the community in uproar. The scene shifts, and we see Kang back in the game, standing butt naked in the middle of the street. Sure enough, this gets the attention of all the people around, and Kang doesn't seem to know what's going on. As if it wasn't already embarrassing enough, another player points to Kang while laughing and shouts for others to look at him. One of the other players refuses to look, stating that Kang has clearly lost his mind. It doesn't take long before everyone around starts murmuring about the situation. Some of them even suggest reporting Kang, and begin to call for the game masters in charge of moderating the game. When Kang sees that he's about to be in a lot of trouble, he nervously tells them to wait, claiming that he's going to equip his clothes right away. He tells them not to report him and goes straight to his inventory. Unfortunately, when he checks it, he's shocked to find it empty. From the crazy look on his face, you can tell he's horrified when he sees that all his items are missing. Confused, he wonders if it might be a bug and frantically starts searching for the report bug button. Sure enough, that button is nowhere to be found as well. The reality of the situation finally dawns on him when he sees his profile has been changed. He's no longer a rank 50 solo warrior, but just a level 1 beginner. Kang screams so loud that it gets his mother's attention in the real world. The worried woman rushes to his room, thinking that he was attacked by a thief or something. However, she finds Kang sweating and panting in front of his capsule. He doesn't say anything at first, and the suspense makes his mother gulp in anxiety. Eventually, he reveals the problem, telling her that he thinks his account has been hacked. Kang's mother freezes when she hears this, and then decides to confirm what he's talking about. She asks him if he's talking about his gaming account, and the man-child nods in response with tears running down his face. Hearing this, his mother goes into a state of absolute rage, and we see her head turn into that of a tiger, implying that she's probably about to rip his sorry ass apart. She's beyond enraged, and disappointed that he's creating such a scene for something as little as a game. Reminds me of the time my mom smacked my head with a sandal while I was playing Valorant, and honestly, that was well deserved. Anyway, she resumes her scolding and reminds him of what he told her when he decided to drop out of college. Back then, Kang claimed that he'd figure things out himself and go down a reasonable career. However, ever since then, all he does is play games inside and doze off whenever he goes to the civil servant cram school. The furious mother asks him how his recent actions show that he's figuring anything out. Kang is speechless after that, so she just storms out of his room, telling him that he's going to give her an aneurysm one of these days. She gave him a serious scolding, but it seems he isn't affected by it at all. He's more concerned about his avatar, Bartz, and prays that the game brings him back because of how much it took to raise him. And with that, Kang curls himself up beside his capsule and sobs in despair. The world's best solo player, the lone wolf, the lonely warrior, the dragon killer, all of those titles are gone in the air in just a single moment. Later, Kang calls DreamMax Corporation, the developers of the game, to explain to them the situation of his account. Like the man-child he is, Kang starts to complain that his character might have been hacked. He explains that he already submitted a ticket, but got a response that says everything was normal. However, he's sure that it's not possible because all his gaming data has been wiped. Like all customer service personnel, the person on the other end starts asking questions that have already been answered, for confirmation. Understandably, Kang starts to get impatient and a bit annoyed, especially when the person tells him to wait a moment. Kang's anxiety increases as he waits to hear what the verdict is. Unfortunately, it's not what he wanted to hear. My boy is informed that his details have been verified, and it has been confirmed that his character was created only 4 days ago. On top of that, the agent tells Kang that nothing seems out of the ordinary with his account. As you'd expect, our hero refuses to accept it. He tries to explain that he created Bart's a long time ago during the open beta, and laments that not only his levels have been reset, all of his gear has also vanished. That's when the truth finally comes out, when the agent tells Kang that the Bart's character he's referring to has been deleted 5 days ago. Of course, Kang is horrified to hear this because he doesn't remember doing such a thing. He even tries to explain that he wasn't able to log in for the past week because he was at his grandma's place. He starts to get angry again, and insists that his account was hacked because he couldn't have deleted his prized character. The agent tries to convince him that he's not being gaslighted, and assures him that Dream Max has a world-class security system. Heck, he even claims that the issues he's having are most likely to be a result of his own mismanagement of personal information. In other words, my boy is being told that he's the one at fault. The agent adds that the company recommends changing passwords weekly, just in order to prevent such unfortunate occurrences. As he listens to the agent, Kang's lips start to quiver, but he forces himself not to cry. The agent then confirms that Kang wasn't changing his passwords every week as recommended, and as a result, the company cannot take responsibility for his mismanagement of personal information. Before the agent can finish talking, Kang angrily cuts him off, yelling that he understands before hanging up the phone call. Kang still believes that his account was hacked, because he knows for a fact that he never deleted the account. Heartbroken and enraged, my boy swears that he's never going to forgive the perpetrator, even though he doesn't know who that person is. At this point, he's already developed a vendetta against the unknown hacker. Later that evening, Kang's brother Hyan walks in on him conducting a funeral service for Bart's. Hyan initially came in because their mom wanted to see Kang, but seeing his brother spiral, he just stands there in confusion. Kang weirdly offers Hyan a drink, and the latter starts to wonder if his older brother has gone insane. Hyan can't drink since he's a minor, but Kang seems to have forgotten that as well. With a condescending and disappointed look on his face, Hyan asks Kang if he finally lost his mind while studying for the civil servant exam. The boy never really believed his brother could pass the exam, even though their mom somehow still expected him to. Kang admits that he's actually lost his mind, but not for the reason his little brother thinks. He reveals that his other half has left the world, and there's no way he can stay clear-minded. Even though Hyan is incredibly disappointed, he manages to fake some sympathy for his older brother as he drowns his sorrows in alcohol. While Kang plans to drink himself to death, Hyan just thinks about what a loser his brother is. As if gaming all day wasn't already pathetic enough, now he wants to add drunkenness to his CV. Anyway, Hyan shakes off the thought and proceeds to reveal why he came in the first place. He tells Kang that their mom wants him to grab a ladle from downstairs. The older brother explains that he's busy and asks Hyan to go grab it himself. But the boy points out that unlike some people, he actually has to go to school and wants to be there. He reminds his older brother that he's a high school student, and not an unemployed adult like his pathetic ass. Hearing this, Kang can't help but feel the sting from his younger brother's lack of respect for him. Kang even believes that Hyan might think he's beneath him, even though he's the bigger brother. After the young boy leaves for school, Kang finally goes downstairs where their family business is run. He tells his dad that his mom wants a ladle, and the old man wonders why. After claiming that he doesn't know, my guy remembers that she said she broke it while making fried rice. Kang's father is surprised to hear this, and wonders how hard she must have been using the ladle for it to break. While fiddling with the ladle, Kang admits that he doesn't know, and talks about how his mom doesn't understand objects all have inherent durability. Then suddenly, he has an epic idea. He thinks about the ladle's durability, and begins to laugh like an absolute maniac. Although his dad has no idea what is going on in his son's head, Kang seems to have had a moment of eureka. He suddenly bolts upstairs like a crazy person, while his dad shouts for him to close the door before he leaves. Kang realizes that Arpedia Online has a durability system. Every piece of equipment consumes its durability as you use it, and when it gets to 0, the item always gets destroyed. Because of this, players always seek out blacksmiths who can repair their weapons ahead of time, and the repairability of the equipment changes by level. This means that the better and more expensive the equipment is, the higher the level of the blacksmith you have to entrust it to. Now, what do you think would happen if a high-level blacksmith were to repair equipment for cheap? Well, the answer is that everyone would come rushing to that blacksmith to request repairs. Kang remembers how all of Bart's equipment were expensive and rare items, so he knows that there's no way a hacker would have left them alone. Kang believes that the hacker sold all of his items before deleting his character, so he plans to find the person by following their trail of sale. With this plan in mind, Kang is more confident than ever that it's just a matter of time before he catches the hacker. The scene shifts, and Kang re-enters the game. At the entrance gate of Arpedia Online, a yellow ball angel asks our hero if he'd like to log in. But this time, he's got something else in mind. Instead, he wants to create a new character. The gatekeeper asks Kang to choose his character's birthday, and he just tells it to pick a random number. The gatekeeper chooses April 4th and informs Kang, before asking him if he'd like the name to also be selected randomly. Of course, our boy prefers to do that himself. He rubs his chin and thinks intensely to come up with a name, because he wants something short and strong like Bart's. Suddenly, the name comes to mind, and he snaps his fingers in excitement as he chooses Zig as the name for his new character. The gatekeeper accepts the information, and processes it as the gates start to open for Kang. As the character Zig is created, our hero is certain that it's going to be the name of the greatest blacksmith in all of Arpedia. Unfortunately, there are going to be a few obstacles along the way. Because the moment Zig goes to start his new career, the senior blacksmith there tells him that there's no chance for him to succeed in this field, explaining that the job requires endless patience and endurance. He calls Zig a brat and claims that the job isn't something he can take on as he wishes. And with that absurd reasoning, the NPC blacksmith named Smith Pabuchi tells Zig to get out of his shop immediately. There are two ways to gain a production job in Arpedia. The first way is to learn by purchasing a ski book, and the other is to learn by working. The second method would allow you to earn money with a job advancement, but everyone in Arpedia seems to avoid it. The reason for this is that every master craftsman has an odd personality. Out of all of them, Zig is particularly wary of Pabuchi Smith, because even back then when he was Bart's, this asshole would always try to pick a fight with him whenever he wanted to get his equipment repaired. However, now that he's Zig and also broke, he decides that the best thing for him to do as a level 10 character with only 35 gold in his account is to go for the job advancement quest. He believes that it shouldn't be that hard, and that's why he knocked on Pabuchi's door in the first place. He walks into the smithy and tells the dude that he would like to become a blacksmith. Not just any kind, he wants to become the world's greatest blacksmith. Pabuchi finds it amusing, of course, because just by looking at Zig, he can tell that he's not cut out for the job. Our hero naturally protests, claiming that Pabuchi should be fair enough to at least test him before failing him. Hearing this, the blacksmith appears to be quite baffled, so our hero explains that he can order him to do anything to see what he's capable of. After thinking for a moment, Pabuchi agrees to the deal. The scene shifts once again, and we see our boy standing in awe as he looks up at the tall heap of logs, stacked on top of each other. As if he wasn't already overwhelmed enough, Pabuchi suddenly orders him to chop all the wood there, adding that he has only one day to do so. The sun shines on the cruel blacksmith's head, as he tells Zig that he'll reconsider his earlier decision if he succeeds. Pabuchi turns around and walks away, while our boy is still shocked that he expects him to chop so much wood. For clarity's sake, he asks him if he really means it, and Pabuchi just tells him to quit if he doesn't have the balls. Realizing that it's the only way to prove his readiness, our hero gets to work. Unfortunately, he's terrible at chopping wood, and that's just putting it lightly. He swings the axe and misses the log he is supposed to split, and from the way he's panting and gasping for air, it's clear he's been at it for a while. Even the log of wood is disappointed in him at this point, because he hasn't even gotten a scratch from Zig's axe. Determined to succeed, Zig tries again many times, but misses each time to the point that the log of wood starts taunting him. He gets extremely frustrated and starts yelling, wondering why he even has to do this in the first place. He remembers seeing other characters advancing immediately and being taught how to use the hammer, but here he was, struggling to chop a single piece of wood. One of the other lumberjacks chimes in, and suggests that he's probably having difficulty due to his affinity. Zig is curious upon hearing this from the unknown character, so he asks the guy who he is. This is when the man reveals that he's also a hopeful blacksmith apprentice. He explains that the birthday you choose for your character during its creation also determines one's affinity with jobs. And unfortunately, production jobs are notorious for being very difficult at the beginning if the affinity doesn't match. As you'd expect, Zig is both furious and exasperated at the same time, because he realizes that he's once again partly responsible for his problem. He had no idea that birthdays were so important in the game, and already regrets his earlier decision to let the gatekeeper choose for him. The fellow hopeful blacksmith apprentice reveals that he's facing the same struggle because of it. Zig doesn't appear to care about him, and is more concerned about what he can do to fix the situation. He's angry that he didn't know before, and contemplates creating a new character. But if he does that, he'll need to reach level 10 once again. Rather than worrying, Zig decides to just focus on the challenge at hand, and that is to chop the mountainous heap of wood. After all, he's certain that Pabuchi will let him advance if he can chop all the wood. So once again, he takes his axe and starts swinging. With a new sense of motivation, Zig yells for the log of wood to die, but then proceeds to miss again anyway. However, this time, he doesn't relent and instead channels all his frustration into chopping the logs of wood till he succeeds. Pabuchi arrives a while later to meet Zig lying in exhaustion, and is surprised to see that he actually finished the task within a day. Our hero gets back up and reminds the blacksmith that he said he would do it, so now he expects to officially get hired inside the smithy. Unfortunately, the mean Baldy tells Zig that there's still no way he'd hire him yet. He then gives him a sword and orders him to mine 10 black coals from a place called Mount Lankel. Zig practically deflates when he hears this, because he knows that Mount Lankel Mines is a dangerous place where only those above level 15 should dare to go. The field boss of the mountain is a level 45 raging boar, so it's natural that our boy is very reluctant to take the order. He asks Pabuchi if he would take responsibility for his death, pointing out that he just barely got to level 10. In response, the asshole blacksmith shows a rare moment of kindness by letting our hero borrow one of his swords. He still thinks that Zig is too whiny though, so he tells him he can quit if he doesn't like the mission. Zig believes that his affinity shouldn't be that trashy to hold him back, so he eventually accepts the task and takes the sword. However, before setting off, he asks Pabuchi if he promises to hire him when he completes this mission. With a suspicious smirk on his face, Pabuchi agrees to let him become a blacksmith if he succeeds. After the verbal agreement, Zig heads down to the mines, where his objective is to obtain 10 black coal from the location marked by the asshole. Zig seems to have made missing a habit, because even in the mines, he keeps swinging away from his targets. Seeing that his approach isn't working, he calms himself down and decides to use the same pattern from his wood chopping challenge. By gripping the shaft lightly and swinging with a circular momentum, he strikes the mine like he's wielding a sword, and finally obtains the first black coal. Our hero praises himself, suggesting that he just displayed 2 years' worth of experience. With this new strategy, he swings his pickaxe like a sword once again, and it works for the second time in a row. It doesn't take long before Zig uses this effective technique to complete his task. And now that he's acquired 10 black coal, the only thing left is for him to deliver them to Pabuchi, and then he'd finally gain his reward, which is an advancement to blacksmith. Unfortunately, the path back to Pabuchi is ridden with several dangerous monsters. And even though other players are keeping most of them occupied, the level 45 raging boar has its eyes set on only our hero. Just when he thinks he is one step closer to catching the hacker, he receives a warning message, informing him that the field boss has arrived. It appears he had forgotten about the raging boar, because he doesn't really look like someone who's even slightly prepared to fight. The beast charges at him, and my boy does the only reasonable thing he can think of. He runs in the opposite direction, back to where the other players are standing. But of course, when they see the field boss running in their direction, they all scamper out of the way as well. As Zig runs for dear life, he wonders why the raging boar spawned in front of him, when it usually only appears once a day at a random location. He knows that his health is terrible because he's aiming for a production job, and as such, he'll be dead after a single hit from the boar. The terrifying beast opens its wide teeth-filled mouth and tries to bite Zig, but he manages to dodge by jumping over it. As he lands on the floor, he wonders if the boar's aggro is fixed on him, and fears that he'd eventually have to stop running if that's the case. In Arpedia Online, production jobs have an inherent disadvantage in combat. However, Zig believes that the nature of virtual reality games means that the character's body is connected to the real one. And since Arpedia Online is founded on realism, it means that disadvantageous fights are still viable, depending on one's martial capabilities or natural combat senses. With this in mind, our hero gets motivated, so he charges at the boar with his sword. He knows that its weakness is at the center of its forehead, so he just has to land a precise hit in that spot, even if the attack is weak. Unfortunately, precision isn't exactly his forte as we've seen. And to make matters worse, the boar blocks his attack and proceeds to ram him away with a powerful headbutt. By some miracle, our hero ends up surviving still. He thinks that the boar stopped him because he has low movement speed, and regrets not packing any dexterity potions with him before he left. He was still busy swearing in frustration when the raging boar started charging at him again. Zig just stands there confused. He doesn't know what else to do than attempt hitting its weak spot, and since it has already failed, he contemplates running away once again. However, at the last second, he changes his mind, reminding himself that he's the legendary player who shouldn't be worried over a mere entry-level monster. He wields his sword and assumes his former personality, believing that although the character may be temporary, his class is still permanent. Unfortunately, just when he's about to enter God mode, he receives a message that informs him that his stamina is low, telling him to eat some mom's spaghetti. His knees get weak, and he falls to the floor in shock that he's already out of stamina. The raging boar, is about to finish him off when someone shoots a powerful arrow at the monster. The arrow ends up removing 30 levels from the boar, making it look like a harmless pig. The boar is also shocked and screams when it sees one of its horns is broken. Just then, the archer responsible appears, afraid that she did too little damage to the beast. The monster starts raging again and charges at the girl when she doesn't expect it. I guess she didn't really expect to face the consequences of her actions, because now it doesn't look like she knows what to do. The boar jumps into the air, and Zig tells her to aim for the center of its forehead. At the final moment, the girl manages to shake off the nerves and shoots another arrow straight at the creature's weak spot. After the blast, a message pops up, confirming that Archer Sia has defeated the raging boar. Our hero heaves a sigh of relief, knowing that he barely survived. He thanks the archer for her help, but she interrupts him by grabbing him from the shoulder. The girl pulls him closer to herself and asks the man if they've met somewhere before. We continue from where we left off, and our hero just stands there nervously as Sia curiously examines his face. She claims that he looks very familiar, but admits that she might be wrong. She thrusts her face closer to Zig's, making him even more uncomfortable. He starts to panic, wondering what's up with the strange lady and why she's invading his personal space like this. Because he's so nervous, he's too dumbfounded to even reply to her. Sia calls for his attention, asking him if he didn't hear what she said. In response, Zig starts to stutter nervously before suddenly bolting off. As he runs away, he tries to explain that he has a quest to complete and as such, he doesn't have time to talk to strangers even if they just saved his life. Or at least that's what we think he said while running away. Sia is taken by surprise when he jets off, but still can't shake off the feeling that she's met him somewhere before. The scene shifts, and we see that Zig has returned with the 10 black coal that the blacksmith sent him to mine. He presents them with a sack to the mean blacksmith. While holding the bag open and looking at the black coal, Zig realizes that he's never actually seen the minerals before, even though he's been playing Arpedia for a while now. Once again, Zig exceeds Pabuch's expectations. The Baldy admits that he didn't think Zig would successfully acquire the black coal and expresses his surprise. Hearing this, Zig is pretty upset and asks Pabuchi why he would make him do things he didn't think he could accomplish. The Baldy just takes the sack from Zig and finally admits that he was wrong about him. Pabuchi thinks that he can make good use of Zig's grit, so he decides to hire him. Zig is excited to hear this and relieved too. Suddenly, the ball-like angel appears, asking if he would like to become a blacksmith. Of course, he does. That's the reason he suffered all that he did in the first place. Just then, a tab pops up, informing Zig that he's officially advanced into a blacksmith, and sure enough, he's delighted that he's finally won. Now, his blacksmith life can begin so that he can one day become a legend. Zig fantasizes about it, but he's interrupted from his daydream when his new boss, Pabuchi, calls out to him, asking him to follow. Zig follows his master as he eagerly awaits the day he catches the hacker who ruined his gaming life. Back at the forge, we see that Zig has already started hammering away. Unfortunately, he's not having too much luck initially. He's supposed to be working on a sword, but what we see looks nothing like a sword. Even though the blade is bent, Zig believes that he must be talented. In his mind, he's created something perfect. He looks at the curved blade in awe, thinking it's brilliant, but Pabuchi bursts his bubble by claiming it's nonsense. The boss doesn't like it, and even doubts that the blade can cut a leaf. He decides to forgive the new apprentice for his mistake, but threatens not to pay him if he makes any piece of junk like it. Zig tries to argue, claiming that his first work should at least have more value, but Pabuchi cuts him off and orders him to make 30 short swords. Of course, Pabuchi warns him not to make any of them ugly because if he does, he's going to get fired. Zig gets annoyed after the boss scolding, and wonders how different his swords could possibly be from the ones others make. He feels very unappreciated, because he's worked all day and night to make this first sword, and yet, his asshole master doesn't care. He curses his bald boss, and vows that he's going to make the best short sword ever. Zig gets to work immediately and stays at it till nightfall. By then, he's almost done with the short sword, but he still feels it's not good enough. Zig examines the weapon, and wonders what he has to do to make a good sword. He gets upset, and to make matters worse, the game starts to taunt him too. A tab pops up, calling his sword a cheap piece of shit that can only be made by a novice.